Business as Unusual is a thought-provoking podcast that explores the innovative strategies, disruptive ideas, and unconventional practices driving successful leaders and companies in the ever-evolving world of modern business. Subscribe, comment, and share for weekly inspiration with our host, Aicila.
Welcome to Business as Unusual. Today I'm here with Brad. Welcome to the show, Brad.
Thank you. Thanks for the invitation.
I'm really delighted to have you share some of your knowledge with our guests, and so they can have some context for that. Will you give them a little summary of what your business is and anything about you that you feel would be fun to share on a podcast?
Well, I was with Accenture for 22 years and 10 years as a partner. And then I happily retired. And 2 years later, the University of Texas at Austin called and asked for some IT help. And I served as the Chief Information Officer for 7 years. And since I retired the second time, I decided to focus on mentoring, coaching, and that's what Brad Englert Advisory does, and focused on writing a book.
So not traditionally what people think of in retirement. One of the things that you mentioned that I'm very excited about, you talked about symbiotic business relationships. Mm-hmm. And that really caught my attention because I feel like when you have more of a feeling of being in life and those relationships are more symbiotic, there's a different flavor to what you're up to. I'm wondering if you'd speak a little bit more about what a symbiotic business relationship is and how you came to that.
Well, I think it really relates to not pushing solutions onto people, especially if you have customers who you value. You can't go in saying, okay, I've got something to sell and sell it to them. You really have to start with what are their goals and aspirations? And then ask yourself, can I help them in any way? If I can't, I may know someone who can. And there have been times where people asked for my help, but I wasn't really the good fit, but I found someone who was. And that always pays forward. So I think it's understanding their goals and aspirations. If you work with them, setting and managing expectations, which is always said, but not always done. And then third is genuinely caring about their success. If you do those three things with your boss, a direct report, customer, vendor, you'll be successful.
So how do you define success?
Well, earlier in my career, it was helping my clients meet their goals, helping them be successful. And I always enjoyed helping them think about where do they want to take their organization and help build that strategy. And the most satisfying thing is then helping them implement the strategy and seeing the results. So I worked on a strategy for a very large university system, 14 campuses. And the number one priority after talking to 300-400 people all across all those campuses was increase the network capacity, because it was just not good, especially in rural parts of the state. Second was they really wanted a digital library, and they wanted to be able to access all the electronic assets and not have each of the 14 campuses try to do it themselves. It doesn't scale. You don't have any leverage. And to the credit for the board, they tripled the capacity of the network, and then they invested in the digital library, which 20 years later, I show up at the University of Texas at Austin, and they're still using the digital library. And in fact, going to 250,000 people in the system. And the faculty and students loved the fact that they could stay at home in their bunny slippers and do their research and not trudge to campus and not find a place to park. So, so it's just coming up with that strategy and then actually help implement it. And then in this case, see the results 20 years later is pretty awesome.
Yeah, there's something about that, being able to I think letting things go off on their own and then seeing them show up, and it's neat.
Mm-hmm.
It's really neat. So you touched on it a little bit because I asked about symbiotic relationships, but I'm not sure if that's what you consider to be unusual about what you do. Would you be willing to flesh that out a little bit or talk about that?
I think what I found unusual is this is the anti-networking book. I find networking, everyone talks about networking, and, I've been to many networking events over the years, gathered a few business cards. Not one of those events led to a customer or any further work. They're very transactional, very superficial, I guess would be. And what I was taught with the firm over 22 years is from day one, you need to be building relationships because your peers you're working with may become your customers down the road. The peers you're working with may become peer CIOs down the road, which is exactly what happened in two cases. You just, by meeting with people and understanding their needs and helping them achieve those goals, that's something that can last a lifetime. And I had customers who I hadn't talked to in 10 years call me up, and we'd, recount some funny story from the past. And it was just like we never stopped talking to each other. And this one client who we had a very successful relationship, her son wanted to apply for a job at the university. And she said, could you talk to him and give him some advice? And it's like, of course I would. Now, I knew this guy when he was 5 years old. So,
yeah,
like, now he's a lawyer. But, I gave him some ideas and he got the job. And that's just, happy to help.
Yeah. I do feel like that the feeling of being part of things, that like what you're talking about, relating, connecting, there is messaging or maybe assumptions that somehow that's not professional. And I don't think that's true of everybody. I think there's a little bit of a tension around it because some people, I think it's natural to them. And for other people that they have some kind of feeling about it. Do you have any thoughts around that? Like because it seems like there is a place where you're personally professional, if that makes sense. You don't necessarily share everything, but you do relate and connect. If you could speak to that a little bit.
Well, I think some people feel like they don't have the time to do it. So they're too busy, in the day-to-day, and they don't, I really should talk to my boss about what their goals are, but I'm just too busy. Well, that's ridiculous. First time when you meet your boss, you want to understand what their goals and aspirations are. And you want to know how you can help with that. And in consulting, my boss had a sales target every year, and it got bigger every year. And so how could I help him meet that sales target and make more money than my salary? That was always my goal. With your direct reports, if you take over an organization and you have new direct reports, take the time to sit down and talk about, well, what's going well, what's not going well, what should we be doing differently, and where do you want to go in your career? Do you want to become a CIO one day? You do? Okay, when I'm on vacation, I'll give you an interim role as CIO and you can test drive it. If you don't want to be a CIO, you want to be a technician, great. We need those. So just trying to align people. I had people quit because Austin's a high-tech town, a lot of startups, a lot of big tech companies. I can't even compete on salary, but I can compete on balance of life at the university. But I would have people, I'm going to get all this equity and go work with a startup. And one of my network engineers said he was leaving. And I said, well, I don't say this with everybody, but if you don't like it, you can come back. And literally 2 weeks later, he called and said, this startup is a zoo. They feed me and do my dry cleaning because I never go home. I thought this was better for my family because of the salary, but I really want to come back. And actually, the number one value of our organization was family first. And, if there's a school play, go to the school play. If you have a doctor's appointment, go to the doctor's appointment. Don't respond to email 24 hours a day. And I would try to model those behaviors. And basically we had 330 people to back you up. So do what you need to do. And that was really, it just created a culture of, people caring for each other.
I think I want to highlight something you said, which is that you modeled it. And I do feel like I've seen organizations where they'll say that family is first. And it really does matter that the leadership acts like that's true for them. Otherwise, whether they know it or not, they're unconsciously setting up for people to feel like, oh no, this is really what I mean.
Right.
So it's such an important thing to make sure you're actually doing that.
I actually had to teach some of my direct reports how to take a vacation. It's a skill. It
is a skill.
You need to plan ahead. You need to know who's going to be in charge when you're gone. And you need to not check email and your voicemail while you're away. Because if you do that, then your staff think you're still working. And then it undermines whoever your interim is. So, I would actually, and it took me a while to learn how to set and manage expectations. So I had a client who asked me to take over this multi-year transformational program, and it had trouble, but they had all the pieces to be successful. And so I knew we would be. So I'm meeting with the provost and the chief financial officer of the faculty club. It's October. And I said, I can't wait to come help you guys. This is going to be wonderful. However, next June, I have a vacation scheduled to Australia. I was an exchange student in high school. We've gone back as a family every 5 years. We didn't go the last time because of work. And so this time we had the passports, we had the tickets. It's 3 weeks in June. And they said, sure, that's fine. So we get to April, made a huge milestone, yay. And then in our May meeting with the president and the provost and the CFO, I said, well, Mr. President, I just wanted to remind you, as I did the last 2 months, that in June I'll be on vacation, 3 weeks in Australia, and his hand started shaking. And so I'm like in slow motion canceling my vacation. Whoa.
Oh, no.
And the chief financial officer and the provost said, Brad, wait. And they said, Mr. President, when Brad joined us in October, he told us about this vacation. He says this is the best time for him to go. We believe that. Diane will be in charge. We should let him go. I went. Didn't check voicemail, didn't check email, came back. Diane did a great job, and all was fine. 10 years later, I'm having dinner with the CFO and our spouses, and we talked about that. And he said, Brad, when you were away, we were scared to death. So my customer defended my vacation.
Wow.
Awesome.
I love that story. So I skimmed the beginning of your book, and actually something in the acknowledgments really caught my attention. You said you had a boss that told you, I believe it was, get out there and let people know that you give a damn.
Yep.
And especially in today's society where we can constantly be in contact, but that showing people you care or that you give a damn and that feeling of connection seems to be a little more fleeting or unattainable. What would you recommend?
Well, I would ask them to look at the 3 principles: understand goals and aspirations, set and manage expectations, and genuinely care. And then I would pick one relationship and try it out. So you don't have to talk to all your customers, but you know who your best customers are. I would start there and just sit down and have the discussion. And especially with peers, because we're all trying to achieve certain things and we often depend on each other. But if you never talk about it, then they don't know you really care about. So at the university, it's 70,000 people, so 54,000 students, 4,000 faculty, and 21,000 staff. I was worried, number one, about public safety. And it wasn't going to be a matter of if something would go wrong, it's when it would go wrong. So I reached out every 4 weeks with my peer who was in charge of public safety. We have football games with 110,000 people. We have commencement. We have a bomb scare. We had a shooting. And so we work proactively that how can we be the most prepared when things will happen, especially unanticipated things. And we just worked out a communication strategy and we practiced it. And for the bomb scare, I was actually out on the mall. So I didn't have my computer, I had my phone, but we arranged that we blast out the text to the conference call number. So I was able to join the conference call with leadership out on the mall and basically coordinate all the IT support with public safety.
Wow.
Just standing out there.
You're like, I'm just standing here on the mall.
We were all told to leave the
phone.
building. We were told to leave the building. So, we couldn't get to a computer.
Wow. Well, and I do think that the planning piece, you can overplan and also you cannot plan on the right things, and finding that skill set to get the most useful critical information to the right people in the right time frame is an important skill set for these types of situations.
Yep, that's right. And we would practice once a year a catastrophic scenario. So we would get public safety in the room with us, with the facilities people, and we would say, okay, there's been an ice storm. We would pick someone at random. You're in charge. And then we would just play out the scenario. And we had a cybersecurity incident. We had a hurricane. We don't get hurricanes in Austin, but we get the tornadoes off the hurricane. So the tornado knocked out the data center. So what happens? How are we going to deal with that? We had a power outage scenario. Well, we actually generate our own power. Believe it or not, for the first time in 20 years, the power went out one day. And, and the backup to the city didn't happen. So it's like, okay, glad we practiced that one. So, but then there are times you can't anticipate it, but you just have to have that culture of trying. And we always learn from each of those exercises. We always learn something new.
Yeah. Who do you coach or who do you typically work with right now who thrives with your service?
I'm a mentor for an organization here in town, the Austin Women in Technology. And my current mentee is studying cybersecurity and wants to get into that role. I'll actually be talking to her later today and just checking in. And what a great opportunity area for her. I mean, there are 500,000 openings in cybersecurity today in the U.S. So I'm just helping her get connected with people I know in the field and the like. Then my graduate school here at the University of Texas, I have 3 mentees there, and it's fun. I start with the first years and help them with getting their internships, and then the second year is helping them to get a job. And last year I had the mentee who just knocked it out of the park. He did everything proactively he could and landed the job in DC that he wanted. It was amazing.
So I feel like I can guess, but usually there's something like, instead of pursuing a traditional route of retirement and going and sipping mocktails on a beach, you decided to start mentoring people. What about you in your life helped you to see these these different things as a need? Like, because other people would have those experiences, but for you, it turned into an action.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm always curious, like, what prompts that action and not sort of like, oh, that would be cool, and let me move on to something else?
Well, I think it all started with the firm. From day one, I had a mentor.
Mm.
And when I became manager, I became a mentor and a mentee. So
Mm-hmm.
a partner advising me, and I'm advising senior consultants. And as a partner, helping managers move to become a partner. So it's just part of the culture. And the other part of the culture of the firm is the investment in training. So training and mentoring, it was just a core value of the firm and what attracted me to the firm. And I enjoyed it. And, even though you're a partner and you have a big quota you need to meet for sales and delivery, you could not be a mentor.
Mm-hmm.
You could not do your evaluations on time. You couldn't.
Mm-hmm.
You were expected to teach once a year. So the year I retired, 3 months prior to retirement, I'm up in our training center in St. Charles with other partners teaching project management to 200 people from all over the world. I mean, what a joy.
Mm-hmm.
And, I didn't have to do that, but I wanted to do that. And so I think that's where I saw the value in it. I actually took all my annual evaluations for 22 years and looked at what mentoring I received. And at the book signing, one of my partner mentors was there, and you did a masterful job. They asked me to do stretch roles, get the technical skills at the right time. The stretch roles were called field promotions. So you go you go to this client and pretend you're an associate partner, but you're a manager. So it was kind of a risk-free, I could be like an associate partner, but I was still learning and still a manager. So it was kind of a
Hmm.
risk-free approach that. And then when I got to the university, the central IT was kind of a wounded organization. Their culture was uh, heroics and fire drills. And I really, which is kind of the opposite of my approach. And so I worked with my direct reports and them with their teams to move from rewarding heroics to proactively planning and being proactively customer service oriented. And it took
Mm.
about a year and a half, but certainly by the time I left, that culture was totally customer focused and proactive. So I see the value in it.
When it sounds like it was a culture of curiosity and learning, from my limited experiences, I feel like that's atypical. Do you think that's atypical, or do you think it happens more often than we're aware of, and just the sort of more transactional sort of cookie cutter places they get all the press?
And when you say to what are you?
The mentoring and the customer, like the genuinely caring about relationships, the customer focus, like.
I'd say it mostly doesn't happen. It needs to be very
Yeah.
intentional. And
Yeah.
that's where I work with my direct reports and say, okay, I'm going to meet with 7 to 10 of my peers across campus. Public safety, facilities, the vice provost for learning. I'm going to meet with those people who are at my level, and we're all trying to achieve great things. How can we help each other? And I would ask my direct reports, you need to build 6 to 10 relationships with your peers. And
Mm-hmm.
that created this network of about 90 relationships that was very intentional. And every 4 to 6 weeks, depending on how closely you work with your peer, you would meet. And a woman who worked for me was reviewing the manuscript and said, Brad, you need to tell this story. And of course, I forgot about it. She goes, you ordered me to go meet with this IT director. And I thought you were insane because they hated us. But you said you'd rather have us in the tent than them outside throwing rocks at us. So she started meeting with this woman. Another month goes by, another month, and we started getting better about being more predictable, communicating better. And that IT manager could see the changes and had a dialogue with my direct report and could report back to me. And after 9 months, she became an advocate for us. And because she could see the culture change, because it's what they wanted. It's what she wanted. Mm-hmm. She wanted to have a collaborative, trusting working relationship. She didn't want heroics,
Right.
And when she became an advocate, her department chair became an advocate who also was wary of our organization for just cause. I mean, there was some bad behavior in the past. But it's not showing up and having coffee. It's showing up with a pre-vetted agenda so they know what you want to talk about and they can add stuff they want to talk about. And so it's how do you communicate what strategies you're working on? So a good example is the provost wanted to really change from all lectures to put the lectures on video, use learning management system to have links and stuff, and then have discussion in the classroom. Well, the learning management system we used was old, buggy, and couldn't even securely connect to student email. Well, we couldn't do it, but she and I worked together with students and faculty to pick a new solution, and they picked a modern cloud-based product. And when I took it to leadership, the president asked, well, what do the students and faculty think? And said, well, they're unanimously endorsing the recommendation. And he says, well, we're doing it. And it took 2 years because, we're like turning an aircraft carrier. Some courses are only taught every 2 years, but the beauty was there was pull to the new solution because it was so much better than the old one. And when it came to H1N1 swine flu, that was my first year. We could not have gone online with that old system, 20-year-old email system, 8 to 10-year-old servers. I mean, but in March 2022, my successor was able to increase VPN, increase Zoom, and 70,000 people went online to do research, teaching, learning, and work. So, but it took 8 years to get there.
Some things take time, right? It's especially if you want to build it effectively, you got to balance that.
Yeah.
So what do you do to keep yourself inspired or recharge?
Well, I enjoy traveling. We did our every 5-year trip to Australia in August. I got to see 2 of the 3 families I lived with in the 70s. And
neat.
It was just a riot. And saw the high school I went to, and my Australian mom, I told her I was the chief information officer at the University of Texas at Austin. She looked at me and said, I didn't think you're that smart. It's like perfect like a mom. I said, well, you knew me when I was 17, so I wasn't very smart then. But we were there for 3.5 weeks, and we've seen nearly every region in the country. We were in the far outback in Western Australia, land that hadn't been changed in a billion years. It was amazing.
Wow, that does sound amazing. So folks that are listening that want to learn more, follow you, get in touch, what's the best way for them to do that?
Well, I'm on LinkedIn. That's easy. And I have a website, bradenglert.com. And I'm going to send a customized link to you that will provide access to a free sampling of the book, access to how to buy the book, and ability to schedule time on my calendar.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for joining me today to talk about what you're up to.
Thank you.
Thanks everybody for listening. I hope you enjoy the show. I love making it. If you did enjoy it, consider hopping over to the review portion of the platform you listen on and letting other people know about it. Or share the episode or the entire show with a friend or subscribe to the show. Definitely reach out, get on my newsletter, follow me on social media, and let me know what you like, what you don't like, and what you'd like to see in the future. Well, we love our guests. Appearance on the Business as Unusual podcast or any Bicurean consulting production is for information purposes only and is not to be considered an endorsement of their business practices, or character. Please properly vet anyone you find through this podcast and generally before you do any business with them. Thank you for listening.